When bears strike, nowhere is safe. From a black bear storming a California RV park to a Kodiak tearing through a police station, from a Russian grizzly killing a logger to a polar bear rampaging through a Norwegian village, from a couple mauled in Alaska to a hiker nearly killed for a selfie in the Carpathians, these stories prove that one mistake, one scent, or one step too close can mean disaster. In this video, we'll look at 6 terrifying bear encounters where ordinary days turned into life or death struggles. On August 22, 2025, the quiet sounds of laughter and water flowing through a Northern California RV park filled the warm afternoon. Families grilled food near their campers, children played by the riverbank, and the scene looked calm under the bright sun. Olivia Ramirez, 34, had settled on a smooth rock beside the water, enjoying the peace while tossing sticks into the current for her golden retriever, Max, who bounded in and out of the river with endless energy. She felt far from danger, but the wild around the park held hidden risks that no one expected. From the dense brush that lined the river, a large black bear lurked, its nose lifting to catch the rich mix of smells drifting through the air. The scent of food scraps, grilling meat, and even the playful dog drew it closer. Step by step, it moved silently through the undergrowth until its heavy body edged near the clearing. For a moment, it stayed hidden, only its dark eyes watching. Then, in a sudden burst of power, the animal charged from the cover, sending leaves and branches flying. The massive bear struck first at Max, swiping one paw at the golden retriever. The dog stumbled back, barking wildly, but the force of the strike redirected the predator toward Olivia. She had only seconds to react as the beast lunged at her, slamming into the rock and knocking her hard to the ground. The shock of the fall sent her scrambling through dirt and gravel, reaching desperately for something to defend herself. Her hand found a heavy branch that had broken free from a tree, and she raised it with trembling arms. For an instant, she swung the branch at the bear, striking against its thick fur. The blow did nothing to slow its fury. With one swift motion, the predator knocked the branch aside, the wood splintering under its weight. Then it sank its teeth deep into her leg, the sharp pain tearing through her body as blood soaked her jeans. She cried out, trying to drag herself away, the massive bulk of the animal looming above her. Max leapt back into the fight, barking furiously and darting around the predator. His noise and movement gave Olivia a narrow chance to crawl toward the water's edge, her hands scraping over sharp stones as she dragged her injured body inch by inch. The bear shifted its focus between her and the dog, its growls echoing through the trees. At that moment, other campers from nearby trailers rushed toward the scene. They grabbed whatever they could, coolers, pans, even heavy sticks, and banged them together with all their strength. Shouts filled the air, breaking the stillness of the park, as the people surrounded the animal with noise. The bear paused, its ears twitching at the sudden chaos. With one last deep growl, it turned and retreated into the thick trees, leaving behind torn earth and blood on the stones. The once peaceful afternoon had turned into a nightmare within minutes, the park shaken by the raw power of a predator that no one expected to face so close to their campsite. The echoes of noise faded as the black bear disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the heavy sound of panic. Olivia lay near the riverbank, trembling from the sharp pain in her leg, where the predator had bitten deep. Her jeans were shredded, blood seeping into the stones and soaking her shoes. Max stood guard at her side, still barking in short bursts, his body stiff as though ready to spring again if the animal returned. The campers who had rushed forward moments earlier now crowded around, some keeping watch on the tree line, while others focused on Olivia's wounds. 2 men tore shirts into strips and pressed them against the injury, trying to slow the bleeding. Each touch brought fresh pain, but Olivia forced herself to stay still as they worked quickly. A group of women carried towels and bottles of water from a nearby trailer, helping wash the dirt and gravel from her scraped arms. The sense of fear still clung thick in the air, but the unity of the group kept everyone moving with purpose. Every eye flicked toward the forest, wary of another charge, yet the bear did not return. Within minutes, someone raced to call emergency services, their voice tight with urgency as they described the attack. The sound of a siren seemed far away, but the group worked to keep Olivia awake and steady, knowing every second mattered. Her face was pale under the summer sun, yet she clutched Max's collar with one hand, grounding herself in the moment. The golden retriever, though shaken, stayed close, licking her arm as though to reassure her that she was not alone. When the ambulance finally arrived, paramedics rushed in with medical kits, their boots kicking up dust as they made their way across the clearing. They wrapped her wounds with clean bandages and placed her carefully onto a stretcher, sliding her into the back of the vehicle. Max was lifted in beside her, unwilling to leave her side. As the ambulance doors closed, the crowd of campers stood silently, the chaos of the attack still echoing in their minds. At the hospital, doctors worked to repair the torn muscle and deep punctures in her leg. Stitches closed the ragged wounds, while fluids and medicine helped stabilize her body. Nurses kept Max nearby, knowing the dog had played a vital role in keeping her alive. Over the following days, she endured long hours of treatment, her body slowly mending though her movements remained limited. Bruises covered her arms and shoulders, each one a reminder of how close she had come to losing her life. News of the attack spread quickly through the region. Officials visited the RV park, setting new rules about storing food, securing trash, and limiting activities near the riverbank. Rangers reinforced warnings that black bears, though often shy, could become aggressive when curious or when drawn by food smells. Campsites that had once felt safe were now viewed with caution, and the sight of the forest edge stirred unease in those who had witnessed the chaos. For Olivia, recovery was slow but steady. Her leg would carry scars, and her nights were filled with memories of the sudden charge, the weight of the bear, and the helpless struggle on the ground. Yet she also carried gratitude for Max's courage, for the campers' quick actions, and for the chance to survive. The RV park returned to normal in time, but no one who had been there would forget the afternoon when the wild broke into their gathering and showed how fragile safety could be. On September 10, 2024, the stillness of a crisp Alaskan morning shattered inside a small police station when a massive Kodiak bear stormed the grounds. The creature, drawn by the powerful scent drifting from a cafeteria delivery truck parked outside, barreled through the front gates with raw strength. Its heavy frame slammed against the station doors, shattering glass and ripping the hinges loose. Inside, Sergeant Lena Thompson, 42, sat at her desk, surrounded by paperwork and reports from the previous night's patrols. The noise came without warning, a thunderous crash followed by the roar of splintering wood and breaking windows. Within seconds, the beast burst into the lobby, shards of glass scattering across the floor. The impact toppled a filing cabinet, sending papers into the air like a storm of white confetti. Chaos swept through the station as officers scrambled for cover. Some rushed toward the holding cells, locking themselves behind iron doors, hoping the thick metal would hold. Others ducked into offices, hearts pounding as the roar of the bear echoed through the walls. Its immense paws swiped at furniture, sending office chairs tumbling and crushing evidence crates into splinters. Mark Reynolds, 36, attempted to retreat down a hallway, but the predator cut him off with frightening speed. One swing of its claws smashed him against a wall, the sharp edges of its teeth sinking into his shoulder. Pain exploded through him as he struggled beneath its weight. Desperate, he crawled under a desk, his uniform torn and blood soaking his side. The bear snarled, pacing around the furniture, its breath hot and heavy as it searched for movement. Meanwhile, Lena pulled herself into the corner of the records room, clutching the edge of a desk as the vibrations from the rampage rattled the floor. For nearly 20 minutes, the station became a battlefield of overturned tables, smashed radios, and shattered glass. The sound of the beast's growls filled every corridor, mixed with the heavy thuds of furniture being tossed aside. Finally, the arrival of wildlife officers shifted the tide. Armed with tranquilizer rifles, they moved carefully toward the lobby, keeping their distance as the bear turned its furious eyes on them. A dart struck its flank, followed by another. The animal staggered, thrashing with powerful limbs as it resisted, before collapsing with a final echoing growl onto the broken floor of the station. The building, once a place of order and safety, now stood in ruins, its lobby torn apart, its walls scarred by claws and teeth. The officers inside remained silent for a moment, each breath heavy, realizing how close they had come to disaster. The subdued Kodiak had shown them that even the strongest walls could not withstand the raw force of nature. The silence that followed the tranquilizer darts was heavy, broken only by the faint crackle of damaged radios and the groans of bent steel. The lobby, once the center of order, looked like a battlefield, with glass, paper, and broken furniture scattered in every direction. Dust and insulation hung in the air, mixing with the sharp scent of fur and blood. Officers slowly emerged from hiding places, their faces pale, their movements stiff, as though afraid the animal might rise again. Mark Reynolds remained pinned under the desk where he had crawled. Blood stained his uniform from the deep bite in his shoulder, and every breath came in shallow gasps. 2 officers rushed to his side, pulling him out carefully while pressing strips of fabric torn from the office curtains against the wounds. His skin was pale, but his eyes remained open, holding on through the pain. He was quickly moved toward the medical responders who had been waiting outside, each step leaving drops of blood across the floor. Sergeant Lena walked through the wreckage with slow steps, her boots crunching on broken glass. Her mind replayed the last 20 minutes again and again, the sound of claws against metal, the roar echoing in narrow hallways, and the sight of her team hiding behind cell doors. She steadied herself against a wall, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with knowing how close they had come to losing more lives. The lobby where she had spent years greeting townspeople now looked as if a storm had torn through it. Wildlife officers worked quickly, circling the fallen Kodiak with cautious eyes. Even subdued, the size of the predator was overwhelming. Its body stretched across the floor with muscles twitching from the tranquilizers. Weighing more than 900 pounds, it seemed almost unnatural to see it inside a station built for paperwork, meetings, and routine law enforcement tasks. Chains and straps were brought in to haul the animal out, and the floor groaned as its weight was dragged toward the waiting truck outside. Outside the building, townspeople had gathered. Drawn by the commotion, whispers spread through the crowd as they watched the massive bear being secured and lifted. Parents held their children close, faces filled with disbelief that a creature of such power had breached the heart of their community. For them, the police station had always been a symbol of safety, yet now it was marked by clawed doors and shattered windows. Hours later, as the sun dipped lower, crews worked to board up the damaged entrance, sweep debris, and gather the scattered files. The once orderly system of reports and records was reduced to piles of torn paper, many pages lost entirely in the wreckage. Officers sat in silence at their desks, their uniforms still dirty, their minds still locked in the shock of what had unfolded. In the days that followed, medical updates brought some relief. Mark survived the attack but faced weeks of recovery, his arm bound and shoulder stitched. Lena and the others carried bruises and cuts from flying debris, but no permanent injuries. Still, the memory of the attack remained sharper than any wound. Authorities issued warnings throughout the region, urging strict control over food storage and delivery schedules. They emphasized that bears conditioned by food smells could break into even the most unlikely places. For many, the image of a Kodiak inside a police station became a chilling reminder that the wild could invade human spaces without warning. The scars on the building's walls stood as proof of that morning, a reminder of both survival and the fragile line between safety and chaos. On October 5th, 2021, the logging camp in the Amur region carried its usual rhythm. The smell of fresh timber clung to the damp air, mingling with smoke from the crew's small cooking fire. Chainsaws had gone quiet for the midday break, and men moved through the muddy clearing stacking wood, their boots sinking with each step. Beyond the open ground, the forest pressed close, its dark fringe always present, silent and watchful. From those trees came movement. At first, only a shifting of branches. Then a hulking shape emerged, a massive grizzly pushing into the open with deliberate steps. Its head swung, nostrils flaring at the sense of food and men. The sheer bulk of the animal dwarfed the scattered machines and timber stacks. For a heartbeat, the camp froze in uneasy stillness. Then the predator surged forward. Viktor Sokolov, 42, reacted on instinct. He bolted toward a small tree near the equipment piles and scrambled upward, boots scraping wet bark. Fingers clutched at thin branches as he pulled himself higher. For a moment he seemed safe, lifted just above reach, but the bear reared on its hind legs, swiping with frightening power. A heavy paw connected, tearing him loose. He fell hard, the breath driven from his chest. Before he could move, the animal closed over him. The clearing erupted with sound. Screams tore the air as the predator dragged Victor across the churned mud. Jaws clamped, claws raking. Branches snapped beneath the weight of his body. The men who watched were struck with the shock of the impossible. Work had turned in seconds to horror. Mikhail Petrov, 38, broke from the line of frozen faces. He charged with a chainsaw, its motor screaming. The blade struck a log near the bear's flank, spitting sparks. The animal wheeled on him, a single swipe carving deep across his arms. Blood splattered his sleeves as the chainsaw slipped from his grip and dropped into the mud. He staggered back, gasping, eyes wide in disbelief at the damage in an instant. Chaos spread. Some workers hurled sticks and stones. Others stumbled in retreat. The bear gave no ground. It dragged Victor like a doll, tossing him against branches and splintered wood. The forest swallowed the men's shouts as the frenzy continued. Minutes stretched, each second marked by the sound of growls, of breaking timber, of men too afraid to draw closer. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the predator turned. With a low roar, it lumbered toward the tree line. Its vast frame slipped back into shadow, swallowed by the undergrowth. Silence fell, so heavy that even the wind seemed to pause. On the ground, Victor lay broken. His chest no longer rose. Blood pooled beneath him, seeping into the soil. The forest that had always surrounded their lives had claimed him, not with a falling tree or the grind of a saw, but with teeth and claws. Mikhail sat slumped against a broken crate, his arms wrapped in makeshift bandages torn from shirts. His skin was pale, his breaths uneven, but his eyes stayed open. He mumbled weakly for water while a co-worker held his head steady. Everyone knew help was far away. The nearest road was long, the mud thick, and the journey uncertain. The clearing itself bore the memory of what had happened. Tools lay scattered, chainsaws bent, and piles of timber smashed aside. The smell of blood clung to the damp air. Men stood in silence, glancing constantly at the tree line, afraid the shadows might shift again. When the first runner reached a radio post, a message went crackling across the wires to the nearest settlement. Authorities answered with promises of rescue, but hours stretched before any sound of vehicles reached the camp. In that waiting, every creak of branches and flutter of crows tightened nerves. By the time rescuers arrived, the camp had taken on the look of abandonment. Victor's body lay beneath a tarp, his co-workers standing vigil beside him. None spoke. When the stretcher-bearers lifted him, their boots sank into mud still dark with blood. Mikhail was carried out as well, wrapped tighter, his groans breaking the silence as he was passed toward the waiting truck. Work ceased entirely. The rhythm of cutting and stacking wood had been silenced. That night the campfire burned small. Men sat close, their voices hushed, speaking not of home or laughter, but of what the forest could take without warning. They listened to the night differently. Every rustle a threat, every shadow a reminder. Officials came later with warnings and instructions. They spoke of patrols, of keeping camps clean, of guarding food carefully. Once a predator learned to approach men for food, they said it might return. But for those who had been there, warnings carried little weight. They had seen the wild breach their circle of work and firelight. They had watched it take a man whose strength had always seemed certain. The clearing would bear its scar long after, not just the gouges in mud or the shattered logs, but the silence that hung where saws once roared. Victor's life had ended in that space, and the forest had closed over it as if it had always belonged to the wild. On November 9, 2024, the icy morning air of Svalbard carried the sound of sled dogs barking restlessly as the village stirred awake. Snow clung to rooftops, and the first glow of dawn lit the narrow streets. Lars Nilsson, 47, moved across his yard, spreading feed for his dogs, unaware that danger was already moving silently through the outskirts. From beyond the frozen ridge, a massive polar bear, weakened by hunger and driven inland by the loss of sea ice, had found its way into the settlement. Its huge paws crunched over the snow as it followed the scent of animals and food scraps. Without warning, the predator lunged into the yard. In one swift motion, it slammed Lars to the ground, the weight of its body crushing him into the icy earth. Sharp teeth tore into his shoulder as sled dogs barked furiously, straining against their chains. Lars fought to push away the immense weight, but the bear's power was overwhelming. His cries carried across the street, rousing neighbors from their homes. The predator tore through the wooden fence, snapping posts as if they were twigs. Trash bins clattered and spilled across the snow as the bear pushed forward, flipping them aside in search of food. Greenhouse panels shattered as it swiped its massive paws, scattering soil, produce, and tools across the frozen ground. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the street, sending children running to second-story windows where they screamed in terror at the chaos below. Neighbors rushed to help however they could. Metal pots clanged loudly, their hollow sound ringing against the houses. Flashlights beamed through the dim dawn, aimed at the predator in desperate attempts to confuse it. Still, the bear pressed deeper into the heart of the village, its pale fur streaked with blood from its earlier attack. Ingrid Johansson, 34, had just stepped outside when the predator turned toward her. She sprinted toward her home, snow spraying under her boots, but the bear lunged and its claws grazed across her side. The strike tore her coat open and left burning scratches along her skin. She stumbled through her doorway, narrowly escaping a fatal blow as the beast turned its attention elsewhere. The streets became a scene of panic. Families shouted from windows, doors slammed shut, and snowmobiles revved as residents tried to scatter or drive the predator back. The bear moved block by block, swiping benches into splinters, smashing doors, and leaving heavy tracks through drifts of snow. For nearly 20 minutes, the village was held in fear, its peace shattered by the roar of an apex predator forced too close to human life. Authorities finally arrived, rifles raised and tranquilizer darts loaded. The shots cracked through the air as they struck, the massive animal stumbling and growling before it finally sagged to the ground. Even subdued, its enormous size and power filled the street with dread. The rampage left fences ruined, greenhouses destroyed, and villagers shaken by the raw force of the encounter. The polar bear lay sedated in the snow as the echoes of chaos slowly faded from the village. Residents stepped cautiously out of their homes, their faces pale with fear, eyes fixed on the enormous body sprawled across the icy ground. Steam rose from its breath as its chest lifted and fell slowly, its immense paws twitching with the effect of the tranquilizer. For the people of Svalbard, the morning no longer felt safe, and the scars of the rampage were clear in every corner of the small settlement. Lars Nielsen was carried by neighbors toward an awaiting vehicle, his jacket soaked with blood and his shoulder heavily bandaged. His sled dogs, still straining at their chains, barked until they were led away to calm down. The ground where the bear had struck him was stained with red, a chilling reminder of how quickly routine tasks could turn into life-or-death struggles. His cries of pain lingered in the air as he was rushed to medical care, leaving others to stare at the ruined yard he had once tended in peace. Ingrid Johansson sat near her doorway, clutching her side where the beast's claws had raked her. Though her wounds were not deep, her trembling hands and tear-streaked face revealed the weight of what she had endured. The memory of the swipe, the sound of the predator's growl just behind her, would stay long after her scratches healed. Other villagers huddled close, comforting her and speaking in hushed tones about how near she had come to tragedy. Everywhere, signs of destruction marked the path the bear had taken. Wooden fences that once enclosed homes were shattered into pieces. Greenhouses that had been carefully tended through the short Arctic summer lay in ruins, their glass panels broken, soil scattered across the snow, and produce frozen where it lay exposed to the cold. Trash bins were overturned, their contents strewn along the street, attracting birds that circled overhead. Tools and equipment lay broken, scattered across the ice where the bear had tossed them aside in its furious search for food. Officials worked methodically, inspecting the damage and recording what had happened. The massive animal was lifted with difficulty onto a sled for transport, its bulk reminding everyone of how close the village had come to disaster. Wildlife teams noted how shrinking sea ice was forcing predators inland in search of food, pushing them into direct conflict with communities that had once felt secure. The reality struck hard. What had happened could happen again, and no fence or door seemed strong enough to stop it. That night, the village gathered in silence. Families sat together inside their homes, windows locked and lights dim, still shaken by the sight of the bear crashing through their streets. Children who had screamed from windows were now too afraid to sleep, their parents offering words of comfort that felt fragile against the memory of the morning. For many, the sounds of smashing glass and growling would echo in their thoughts long after the snow covered the wreckage. The village would rebuild its fences, replace its panels, and clear the streets of scattered debris. But the memory of November 9th would remain. It was no longer just a story of a predator breaking into their lives. It was a warning carved into their community, a reminder that the frozen wilderness surrounding them held dangers that could appear at any moment, drawn by hunger and unstoppable once unleashed. On September 17, 2020, the stillness of the Alaska wilderness wrapped itself around a remote campsite near the Kenai Peninsula. The air was cold, the stars stretched endless above, and the silence of night was broken only by the rustle of trees and the distant call of owls. Daniel Hayes, 38, and his partner Rachel Moore, 35, had set their small tent near the edge of a clearing after a long day. Their cooler rested by the fire pit. Fish remained sealed inside after their evening meal. It seemed a safe place, far from towns and people, but the wild was closer than they realized. From the shadows of the tree line, a massive grizzly moved silently. Hungry and driven by the scent of fish, it closed the distance, its breath visible in the cold air. At around 2 a.m., the peace shattered as the animal charged, its weight shaking the ground as it tore through the camp. The cooler was ripped open in seconds, its contents scattered across the dirt. Gear was tossed aside as the predator surged forward, its fury unstoppable. The tent shook violently as the bear crashed against it. Daniel woke in terror, reaching out, but the canvas split open beneath the force of its claws. Before he could rise, the predator struck, slamming him to the ground. His chest burned as claws tore through his side, leaving him gasping for breath. Rachel scrambled to escape, pushing toward the flap of the tent, but the beast turned toward her. She fell beneath its weight as teeth and claws raked across her. The sound of ripping fabric mixed with cries of pain as she struggled. Daniel, bleeding and half-crushed, dragged himself toward her, his hands reaching to pull her free, but the power of the predator was beyond him. The bear thrashed through the camp, smashing sleeping bags and scattering supplies across the clearing. The glow of the small campfire cast flickering shadows over the violence, its light dancing on the predator's pale fur as it swiped again and again. Daniel cradled Rachel in his arms, his body shielding her from more blows, his voice breaking as he tried to keep her alive. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the predator finally retreated, leaving devastation in its wake. The cooler lay overturned, its contents gone, and gear was shredded across the clearing. Daniel's clothes were soaked in blood, his own wounds deep, but his eyes never left Rachel, who lay gasping in his embrace. He pressed against her injuries with trembling hands, desperate to stop the bleeding, but help was far away. The wilderness, vast and merciless, swallowed their cries as the stars shone coldly overhead. The scene was left in ruin. A once peaceful campsite turned into a place of horror under the shadow of the grizzly's fury. The clearing grew quiet after the predator vanished back into the forest, but the silence carried no comfort. The ground was scattered with broken supplies, clawed fabric, and streaks of red against the frosted soil. Daniel clung to Rachel, his arms wrapped tight, his own blood dripping onto the earth. He tried again and again to press his hands against her wounds, yet the flow would not stop. Her breaths came slower, each one weaker than the last. As dawn painted the horizon, her chest rose for the final time before falling still. Daniel's cries echoed through the trees, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the wilderness. He held her body, rocking back and forth, shivering from pain and shock. His own shoulder and ribs burned with every movement, yet the ache inside him was far heavier. Hours passed in this lonely struggle, with no sound but the rustle of wind and the distant caw of ravens circling overhead. When rescuers finally reached the camp, they found him collapsed beside her, his face pale and streaked with dried tears. Emergency workers lifted him onto a stretcher, but he would not release his grip on her hand until forced by exhaustion. The team moved quickly, wrapping his injuries and loading both of them into separate carriers. The ride out of the forest was long and cold, the silence inside the vehicle as heavy as the night had been. Back in town, word spread quickly of the tragedy. Officials gathered evidence, noting the torn gear and claw marks on nearby trees. They warned that food left behind at campsites draws predators closer, and that no tent can withstand the force of a starving grizzly. Local hunters shook their heads, knowing how dangerous the season could be. Yet even they admitted the brutality of this attack was unsettling. Rachel's loss was felt far beyond the wilderness. Friends and family remembered her as kind, adventurous, and full of energy. Pictures of her smiling beside rivers and mountains stood in painful contrast to the way her life had ended. Daniel remained in the hospital for weeks, his body slowly healing, but his spirit deeply scarred. He spoke little, haunted by memories of the night and the weight of what he could not prevent. The campsite was later cleared, but the scars of that night lingered in the community. Guides began reminding every visitor that even the smallest scent of fish or meat could bring danger, and that quiet nights could turn deadly without warning. The message was repeated in ranger stations and printed on flyers, each one carrying the lesson learned at such a terrible cost. Though the forest grew calm again, the story of September 17th stayed alive. It was retold as both a caution and a memorial, a reminder that the wilderness is beautiful but merciless, and that even the strongest bonds can be shattered in moments when nature strikes without warning. On August 19, 2025, the wild stillness of the Carpathian Mountains carried a hidden danger that would soon break into chaos. Andrei Dumitrescu, 36, walked along a remote trail with his sister Elena, 33, enjoying the sharp air and the tall forest that rose around them. The quiet path wound between slopes and rocky ground, far from any village or ranger post. The two moved at ease, their backpacks filled with food and supplies for the day. It was meant to be a simple hike, nothing more. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, a heavy shape appeared in the distance. A massive brown bear stood among the trees, its head low, nose lifted, testing the air. Instead of turning back, Andrei stepped closer, pulling out his phone. The mountain light caught the screen as he raised it to take a picture. He thought he had time, believed the predator was far enough away. What he did not know was that the bear had caught the scent of his packed meal and was already closing in with dangerous intent. In a blur of movement, the animal charged. The quiet forest erupted with crashing branches as the weight of the beast thundered forward. Andrei fumbled with the phone, his hand shaking, and dropped it in the dirt. His backpack slipped from his shoulders as he stumbled back, but the speed of the predator left no chance to escape. The bear struck him hard, knocking him flat against the ground. Pain ripped through his leg as teeth clamped deep, tearing muscle and flesh. His scream echoed through the valley as the predator shook him violently, tossing his supplies aside like toys. Blood stained the rocks as claws raked across his clothes. Elena cried out in terror, scrambling toward the steep embankment at the side of the path. Dirt and stones slipped beneath her hands as she clawed her way up, the beast swiping just inches behind. The rush of air from its paw brushed past her as she pulled herself higher, her body trembling from fear and adrenaline. The chaos drew the attention of other hikers further along the trail. They rushed closer, voices raised, waving arms and throwing sticks and stones. Their shouts filled the air, sharp and desperate, breaking through the growls of the predator. The beast turned, distracted by the sudden noise and flying branches. Its eyes glared at the group, its breath heavy, before it finally pulled back, stepping into the trees. With a final growl, the bear retreated into the dark forest, leaving the ground torn and stained. Andrei lay on the dirt, blood flowing from his leg, his breath fast and broken. His sister clung to the side of the slope, frozen in shock, her eyes wide with horror. Around them, the hikers rushed in, their faces pale, their hands moving quickly to stop the bleeding. The peaceful mountain trail had become a place of terror, the weight of the encounter leaving all who witnessed it shaken to the core. The hikers moved quickly once the predator disappeared into the forest. They tore strips of cloth and pressed them tightly against Andrei's torn leg, trying to slow the bleeding. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but he remained conscious, his body trembling from shock. Elena slid down the slope and rushed to his side, clutching his hand while others formed a circle, scanning the tree line in case the beast returned. The air felt heavier now, as if every shadow carried danger. Minutes stretched into an unbearable wait until the crackle of a radio broke the silence. One hiker, carrying emergency gear, signaled for help, though the nearest station was many miles away. While they waited, some gathered branches and stones to create noise, ready to defend against another charge. The ground still showed claw marks and patches of blood where the attack had occurred, a grim reminder of how close death had come. After nearly an hour, the thrum of rotor blades cut across the valley. Relief washed over the group as a helicopter descended into a nearby clearing. Paramedics rushed forward, carefully lifting Andre onto a stretcher while securing tight bandages around his leg. His sister followed close, her clothes streaked with dirt from the slope, her eyes fixed only on him. The aircraft lifted into the sky, carrying them away from the valley that had turned from peaceful to deadly in moments. At the hospital, surgeons worked quickly, cleaning and stitching the deep gashes. His leg, though badly damaged, was saved. He would carry the scars forever, a mark of the danger hidden in the wilderness. The story spread quickly through towns and cities, serving as a sharp warning. Officials reminded hikers that wild animals are unpredictable and that no photograph is worth risking life. Rangers emphasized that food must always be stored properly and that distance is the only safe choice when bears are near. Elena remained by his side through the long recovery, her mind replaying the sight of the predator lunging from the brush. The memory would never fade, etched into both their lives. The mountain path that had once seemed inviting now carried a shadow, a reminder that beauty and danger can exist together in the same silence.